Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the second part of the opening ceremony. The greatest honour which any lecturer can receive from ISPO is to be given an invitation to deliver the Knud Jansen lecture. For 2019, David Constantine, MBE, member of the British Empire, was invited to deliver the Knud Jansen lecture. David is well known in the disability sector. He's well known in ISPO sector. David has done great things. He set up motivation to make wheelchairs and distribute them around the world for people who need them. It is a great honour for me to welcome David to deliver the Knud Jansen lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Freebert. Muhammad Ali was once asked what his shortest poem was. He replied in 2 words, me, we. This is a bit about me, but mostly about the we. About how we go beyond ourselves, beyond our own organisations, and connect and collaborate to create greater impact together. I'd like to introduce you to an 11-year-old Bangladeshi boy called Bablu, who in 1991 became a paraplegic after being stabbed, severing his spinal cord. Bablu was lucky. He was brought straight to the rehabilitation of the paralysed, where he would spend 6 months in rehabilitation until he was able to rejoin his family. He was lucky because CRP was the only rehabilitation centre, spinal injury centre in the whole of Bangladesh. Had he ended up at any other hospital, he may well have died from terrible pressure sores, like this boy who died not long after I took this picture. He was also lucky because CRP produced their own wheelchairs made from locally available materials, making them repairable anywhere in the country. How do I know this? Because for a few months, our individual stories had brought us together. I'd like to take you back nearly 10 years to 1982. This is me working on a farm in Queensland, Australia, to gain experience from my agricultural course back in the UK. About 3 weeks after this picture was taken, I went on a camping trip to Fraser Island, a deserted sand island, with 2 guys from Australia I'd only recently met. On our second day there, we stopped at a deserted tidal pool to cool off from the stifling heat. About 30 seconds after this picture was taken, walked over to the Land Cruiser, turned and racing dived into the pool. I got out the other side and I did it again. I knew I shouldn't be diving into a pool that shallow. I remember feeling very present in that moment, realising how special the time and place were. I was 21, fit and healthy, living my dream of working and travelling the world. And this was just the beginning. I felt I had everything to live for. Then, in a moment of young male exuberance, I decided to dive in a 3rd time. This time I jumped in too high, and on landing, caught my head in the sand in the bottom of the pool. I heard a loud crack, felt a flash of pain, and after a moment of lying face down in the water, thinking, that hurt, I went to get out. Nothing happened. I knew that if I moved my head, I might do more damage. I couldn't move my arms or legs, and I couldn't lift my head out of the water. For some reason, I immediately knew what I'd done. I was paralysed, and it was for life. Not wanting to turn my head, and against my better judgment, I held my breath for about a minute, and realising I needed to get for help, shook my head from left to right, hoping the guys had been watching me. I had just started to breathe in water when I heard footsteps splashing through the pool. The guys pulled me up by the shoulders. I spat out the water and said, "Keep my head up straight, lay me down face down on the sand, and don't move me. I've broken my neck. I'm paralysed." About 3 hours later, it was picked up by a helicopter and taken straight to Brisbane, to the only spinal injuries unit in the whole of Queensland. In the emergency room, I had metal tongs screwed into my skull to take the traction weights that would keep my neck straight while my vertebrae healed. I needed to know what I'd really done, so I asked the doctor a straightforward question, deliberately framing it so he could only give me a yes or no answer. I said, "I'm not going to walk again, am I?" He looked me straight in the eye and said, "No, we don't think so." It was a courageous and intelligent answer. It was the answer I expected, but certainly not the one I wanted. In an instant, I realised I'd been signed up to a club I really didn't want to be a member of. But I thought, I'm young, strong, fit and healthy. I'm going to walk out of here. However, no amount of determination or motivation was going to change the spinal injury I had done to myself. Being motivated, however, was going to take me on a very different journey. I spent the next 3 months in rehab, being turned every 2 hours to avoid pressure sores. This is my firmest moment out of bed for 3 months, and my first 30 seconds in a wheelchair. I spent the next 2 months doing physiotherapy and occupational therapy in rehab, and then till I was strong enough to fly home to the UK, and then a further 5 months in rehab in London. Rehab was probably one of the most important learning experiences of my life. And what I learned there has kept me alive and able to manage the health issues that people like Bablu often die from. Like acquiring any permanent disability, I had to redesign my life, redesigning everything from how I got up and went to bed every day to bladder and bowel and skin management. When I left rehab, the National Health Service gave me one of these. At the time, it was the top of the range. Designed in 1932 by Everest Jennings, it was the Rolls-Royce of wheelchairs of its day. Problem was, this was 1982, 50 years later. I went out into the world feeling like I had a piece of hospital engulfing me. A year later, more active style wheelchairs started appearing in the UK. I got one. It changed my life overnight. Suddenly I could push more easily indoors. I could adjust it to my seating needs, be more independent, and most importantly, didn't feel like I had a piece of hospital equipment under me. I would look across the room when I was getting dressed and think, that's actually quite a cool piece of equipment. I want to get in that today. I didn't realise that at the time this was design, improving my quality of life. As a quadriplegic, I felt I had very little control over my life, and that if I didn't start making some decisions, someone was going to start making them for me. That frightened me and kicked me into laying down some foundation stones to start to rebuild my life. I also realised that to take some control over my life, I needed money. I therefore needed a job. But what was I going to do? I had no idea. And I felt my options were very limited. However, I did know that I needed to re-educate myself to get a job. 1982, the year of my injury, was the year that IBM launched the first personal computer on the world. And a computer was to open a whole new world to me. I decided to do a computing course at Oxford Polytechnic. On completing my degree, something I never thought I would be capable of, having left school at 16, I got a graduate entry job at IBM. This would be today's equivalent of a computer student leaving university and walking straight into a job with Apple or Google. I was the envy of my course colleagues. The problem was, that within 6 months of joining this excellent company, I knew I wasn't following my passion. In my first year, I was able to spend time in other departments as work experience. I chose the design department simply because they did the photography, and I thought it would get me out of programming for a few months. In the department were 3 guys working on CAD models, and at lunch one day I asked them what they did. They told me they were industrial designers. I had no idea what an industrial designer was, so I inquired further. They said, well, in a nutshell, we design the hardware that you're writing the software for. I said to them, so you're the guys who put the on-off switch around the back where I can't reach it? Yeah. You're the guys who make the keys too springy so I can't press them down? That moment was my dawning into the world of design. That epiphany moment was the beginning of the end of my programming career and my career at IBM. I applied to do a master's degree in computer-related design at the Royal College of Art in London. There were 3 places on the course, and unbelievably, I got one. The next 2 years were to be the most thought-provoking, mind-expanding of my life so far. By complete chance, in our first year, the whole design department were given a 3-week competition project to design a wheelchair for developing countries, a subject that had never crossed my mind. One of my fellow students, Simon Knud, came over to me and said, look, I've travelled around Asia and Africa a bit, seen what metal workshops and wood workshops are capable of, and you obviously know a bit about wheelchairs. How about we team up? We won the first prize, and over lunch with the judges, we were encouraged to not let the idea drop. We decided to take them at their word and thought India would be a good place to learn more about what we'd designed. We also thought it'd be a great place to spend Christmas on the beach in Goa. And this is where the me part of Ali's poem really starts to become the we. I asked a friend of mine, Richard Frost, from Oxford Polytechnic, to join us. He was working for a large accountancy firm. And in December '89, the 3 of us left the UK to travel around Bangladesh and India, learning about wheelchairs and the needs for people with disabilities. Our first visit was to the Centre for the Rehabilitation of the Paralysed. After spending a week there building a sample wheelchair, using what materials we could find locally, the founder, Valerie Taylor, came up and made what was almost a passing comment. She said, would you boys come back here and build these for us for a few months? We looked at each other, shrugged our shoulders, and said, well, when Simon and I finished college, why not? The seed for the foundation of motivation had been planted. We returned in 1991 for 6 months, set up home in a shed in the grounds of CRP. We thought it was luxury. With an outdoor bathroom, toilet and kitchen, refurbished the workshop and trained the local technicians. The me and we were growing. Using local materials and rickshaw wheels, we produced a range of chairs that were suitable in the rehabilitation setting and built-up environment. During our time in Bangladesh, we got invited to 2 other countries, in Eastern Europe and in Southeast Asia. Motivation's journey had truly started. On our 3rd project in Cambodia in '93, we were exposed for the first time to international NGOs. We were surprised with what we found there. Not only was there conflict going on between the government forces and the Khmer Rouge, there was also conflict going on between organisations in the P&O sector who didn't necessarily agree with each other's approach. This was new to us and seemed like an awful lot of wasted time and energy. We stayed neutral, offering to work with all the organisations, providing them all wheelchairs if they required them. We ended up partnering with the Jesuit Refugee Service, set up a workshop from scratch, and designed the Mekong wheelchair, still produced in Phnom Penh today. There were no regular supplies of tubular steel, so we designed it out of wood. And in Cambodia, we learned 3 things. The first was that by adding a therapist to our team, you combine the design and clinical expertise. If you like, in a nutshell, the hardware and software of seating. It's still a combination that is crucial to our work today. The second was that organisations that don't communicate and work against each other because of a difference of opinion or approach can be a huge waste of time and energy and opportunity. It was a lesson that was to become very important to us. The third, and probably the most important, was about collaboration. Up to this point, we'd only ever worked with one local partner at a time. But in Cambodia, we needed to work with all the players in the P&O field to offer wheeled mobility for their programs and their beneficiaries. And I would like to add something here, which may come over as a little bit controversial to an audience of prosthetists and orthotists. I've sometimes heard it mentioned or intimated that when an amputee chooses to use a wheelchair for the majority of their daily living needs, prosthetists sometimes feel like they've failed in their mission to get someone standing or walking. I put it to you that this is certainly not the case. It merely means that the user is making the most efficient use of the devices available to them to carry out their daily lives. Because I believe that sitting down does not necessarily mean giving up. And as a permanent wheelchair user, I don't want to be made to feel like the mobility device that I use and have to use is seen by some professionals as an instrument of failure. Wheelchairs are no longer the poor cousins of prosthetics and orthotics that they used to be seen as. And I'm really glad that ISPO incorporated wheelchairs and seating in their main mission. Over the next decade, we started to build our team, knowledge, and experience throughout Asia, Africa, Central America, and Eastern Europe, setting up about 22 workshops in 18 different countries, knowing all the time that our work was a drop in the ocean compared with the global need. We went on to develop training courses, and it was here in 1999, while setting up the Wheelchair Technologist Training Course at Tadcott in Tanzania, that we first connected with ISPO. We didn't know it at the time, but the relationship that we started then was to be one of the most important sector-building collaborations that we ever worked on. And at this point, I'd just like to say thank you to all the ISPO presidents and board members who've been willing to work with the wheelchair sector to make the wheelchair sector a better place. You know who you are. It wasn't an easy start, but together we've achieved great things. After 10 years of setting up wheelchair workshops, we realized the limitations of our approach, both in terms of the numbers of chairs provided, quality consistency, and global reach. We decided to embark on a new concept of wheelchair provision, summed up in 3 words: products, services, and training. The aim was to design a range of adjustable flat-pack wheelchairs that could be shipped anywhere in the world, with a training package for assessment, prescription, combining clinical, technical, and user training. Now we were able to provide training and products to international organisations and national NGOs working with disabled people anywhere in the world, and maintain a level of product quality at a more consistent price. Meanwhile, there were other organisations in the wheelchair sector using various approaches to meet need. Some using the local production approach that we had, others a very different approach, including recycling old chairs or using low-cost versions of Erison Jennings chairs in a one-size-fits-all approach. I knew the difference between my first and my second more active style chair, and what a difference it had made to my life. Not in terms of its adjustability, but also its aesthetic. I think what set motivation apart at the time, and hopefully continues to, is a focus on the design-based approach, because we believe that low cost does not need to equal low quality. We entered this sector with a design-based approach, not just one of pure charity, and not assuming that anything is better than nothing. Instead, focusing on the user's needs making them more active and able to take part. And here is an example of appropriate design. 2 chairs, both made in Cambodia in 1993. Same wood, same wheels, same cost. Which would you give your child or client? The one on the left is a product designed with the user in mind. In his book, Do Design, Alan Moore says, the act of bringing something of beauty into the world is a way of bringing good into the world. Infused with optimism, it says simply, life is worthwhile. This is about the self-respect and the self-esteem of the user, a better design for a better life. It's been Motivation's goal for over 20 years to work beyond our own designs and programs, to take a step back and work with and for the wider sector, to bring bigger and better results, doing more with the we. Having seen what happened in the P&O sector in the 90s, we knew the wheelchair sector could learn from what ISPO had done to bring more cohesion and collaboration in the P&O sector. We approached WHO to see what could be done, and through the vision of Shapal Kasnabis, who should be here today, who advised us to go to see ISPO. And through the vision of ISPO, WHO, and USAID, the 2006 Consensus Conference was held and immediately created more communication between organisations. It was a watershed moment for the wheelchair sector. 2 years later, the WHO published one of the most important documents in our sector, the guidelines. Motivation staff and other experts worked on these and the series of training packages that followed to create, improve and train wheelchair services. By now, the we had become many, with connections and collaborations across the sector, and in Motivation's case, working with organisations we didn't necessarily agree with to try and help them to create towards a better outcome for their beneficiaries. The wheelchair sector has learned and benefited from the P&O sector, making it more collected and collaborative. And it's something we can work on further now we have the International Society of Wheelchair Professionals supporting our sector. It's also benefited from the generosity of USAID, who from 2001 have been almost the only funder willing to fund wheelchairs globally. And I'd like to thank them for that. It's really exciting for me that 4 years ago, giving this very lecture was Shapal, telling us about his vision of the GATE Alliance, how to create a list of 50 essential assistive devices. Right now, there are 1 billion people in the world who require some sort of assistive technology. And by 2050, that figure is set to double. It's a wake-up call for all of us as we age and require more assistive devices to maintain our function and our quality of life. As you age, you may not identify with having an impairment or a disability, but you will need assistive technology if you're not already using some. This got me thinking about all the assistive technology that I use on a daily basis to make my life work for me, so that I can live a full and active life. It isn't just a wheelchair and a cushion. Today we see growing collaborations across the sector for these sorts of devices through the AT Scale and AT 2030 programs. The only way we can meet the need is by connecting our experience with each other's and governments to create investment for scale, by bringing together and motivating the greater we to enable a lifetime of human potential. Our own contribution to the AT 2030 Scale Partnership is Motivation's Innovate programme, a new way of locally producing bespoke wheelchairs using clinical and design-led thinking. It may come as a surprise to you that the wheelchair and P&O sectors are in some ways more advanced in provision for low-income countries. We both have education systems and guidelines in those regions. Many other sectors of AT don't have that. And as the Gate Alliance has shown, we need to collaborate in all sectors of AT to create the greater we and move governments to create equitable systems that can still be profit-making, that will provide much-needed AT. So we've gone from this, the basics, to this. Not quite bionics, but on a journey towards a more up-to-date way of producing bespoke fitted wheelchairs at the point of the user. You can hear more about this on Tuesday from a colleague. Over the summer, we trialled our prototype system in Kenya. We trained local technicians to use a new assessment tool, generative design software, and printing products to make made-to-measure wheelchairs at the point of the user. We're using technology to rethink the basics of local production so we can plan for a better future for people with disabilities in low-income countries. And what of Bablu? I was able to go back and visit him a few years ago, and he's gone from this to this. I found him living with his family, running his own shop and creating his own destiny, supporting his family. And there are thousands like him who've benefited from the work of my colleagues and our partners. Which brings me back to Ali's me, we. I think many people associate my name as the person who woke up after a spinal cord injury with a vision to provide wheelchairs for people in developing countries. As you've seen, this is clearly not the case. On my 37-year journey since my injury, I've learned huge amounts about the world, inclusion, appropriate design, seating, and the assistive devices that I use to enable me to do what I do. I hope I've demonstrated that what we've achieved has clearly not been done by me single-handedly. It's been a we journey, and I give huge credit to my co-founders, Simon Gu and Richard Frost, who brought the creative and the strategic skills to motivation. Our incredibly hard-working and passionate team, through the good times and the hard, in particular Christine Cornick, who in 1999 realized that a relationship with ISPO was absolutely crucial to our future work. And all the people like WHO, ICRC, and many, many more who've been willing to collaborate with Motivation and our partners to make the world a better place for our beneficiaries. I feel incredibly lucky that I've been given an amazing opportunity to do something with my life that I love, I feel passionate about, and is hopefully doing some good too. Through my work, I've come to understand a great deal about my own disability and ability, how lucky I am to have been born, live, and rehabilitated in a country that gives me the opportunity to fulfill my life, take part, and be included. I'm truly thankful for the opportunity that was put in front of me. And I recently came to the realization that I've been lucky enough to follow what I honestly believe is what I was put on this earth to do. But I also know, I now know, there are millions of others like me who never have that opportunity. Now both the P&O and wheelchair sector are part of the bigger AT sector. And we all need to work together on a bigger scale to improve the lives of our beneficiaries as we age. It's about me, it's about you, the greater we. So I want you to go out from here and think about how you can continue to challenge and improve the products and services that we're all here to provide. And use this Congress and beyond to go out there and connect, communicate, and collaborate, while all the time keeping a focus on making your work real, practical, and focused on your beneficiaries. Thank you.
If I didn't stop them, David, they'd keep going. Appropriately so. Thank you very much for taking us on a journey with you. Thank you for, and we didn't match notes, but you noticed I introduced the students first this morning. I introduced David inadvertently at the same time, and the students have left, but I hope they get to hear what they can do with their life for people who need their assistance. It has been an inspiring lecture. I really appreciate that you have shared it with us, David. As a Knud Jansen lecturer, you become a member of an elite club. There are only a few people who have the Knud Jansen medal. This is yours to keep, and I hope it will give you as much joy as you have given us by sharing your life with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.